Minister of Families, Children and Social Development Canada, KARINA Gould, is with us today. Couple of issues here that we want to get into. One of them, Natasha, you brought this up during the meeting we had today, and I hadn't heard a whole lot about it. School meal programs now starting to struggle to meet the growing needs of students.
Well, I mean, think about it. It's a tough time for families to make ends meet, and as such, school meal programs are just more in demand than they've ever been, and so they, in turn, are having a hard time making ends meet. So the minister has come to Montreal today, meeting with different organizations that are working on those school programs and sustainable development. So thank you, Minister Gould, for your time today. We appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
So what is the situation right now when it comes to food insecurity? What have you been hearing from those organizations?
Yeah, well, I mean, like families and folks across the country, including here in Montreal, I mean, people are struggling with the high cost of living. And so for families who are, struggling to put healthy food on the table, the same can be said for school meal programs. And I would say that, Canada is the only OECD country that actually doesn't have a national school food policy or program right now. And so we're hearing a big demand from providers of school food to, do more and to step up and to make sure that, children across this country, no matter where they are and what their background are, can have access to healthy and nutritious food.
As you say that, Minister, I can't help but think, I don't think we ever thought living in this country that we would hear a story like this actually happening in Canada. And I realize you can't obviously plan for something like COVID, but is this now systemic? And if it is, how long is it expected to go on for? And what's the long-term plan here?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's actually something that's been going on not just because of inflation, but also pre-COVID. In Canada, about 1 in 5 children go to school hungry. This is something that, advocates have been calling for a very long time, but it's been exacerbated by the pandemic, by inflation, by supply chain issues. And so, as a government, we've taken a number of steps. We indexed the Canada Child Benefit to inflation. We doubled the GST credit rebate for 6 months. We brought in dental care for children under the age of 12 and a rental subsidy for low-income renters. But at the same time, we still understand that, there's a high cost of living. And so, even before the pandemic, we had been talking about bringing forward a national school food policy. And I launched consultations last fall. And so we're kind of wrapping up hearing from stakeholders, from children, from teachers, from provinces and territories about what a next step could potentially look like in Canada.
So with this national school food program, and as you said, you've been hearing from different people, so you have a good sense of what's happening coast to coast. Can I ask how the situation in Montreal or Quebec compares to other provinces?
Well, I would say it's pretty similar across the country. I mean, the cost of food has increased, and so organizations are having to dip into emergency funds and additional resources. They're trying to raise more money from the community at a time earlier than they normally would. So you would normally see organizations kind of put out emergency appeals later on in the school year as opposed to, at the beginning of the calendar year. And so we really are seeing this right across the country. And, I think it's something that is typically, within the provincial and territorial jurisdiction. But I think as we saw with the really successful bilateral agreements that we signed on childcare, that there can be a role for the federal government to play too.
Is the idea here that the face of hunger, if you will, has kind of changed? Like I think we used to associate a certain socioeconomic group with those who were going without meals. That picture has drastically changed, has it not?
I think there are more people today who are working, who are unable to afford to put a meal on the table every day. I think what we're seeing in terms of food bank usage is more people who have full-time jobs. Often what we're actually seeing in the data is less so families, but more single people of working age. We effectively in Canada now have, a basic income for children. We have one for seniors through the Canada Child Benefit and through Old Age Security and Guaranteed Income Supplement. But life is getting more expensive. And so we are seeing people who, have said previously they were donors to food banks, now needing to use them themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's been a radical change. I want to shift, if we can, while we have you, and we do appreciate your time, Minister. There was a lot made, of course, over the summer. Montreal, I don't want to say Montreal was ground zero. I'm sure there were other places as well, but there were some pretty bad situations at passport offices here. People doing whatever they could, and we took plenty of calls when we were asking people about it as well. What is the situation now as far as passports are concerned, wait times are concerned? Where have we reached?
Yeah, so I'm actually calling in right now from the Laval passport office. I'm here kind of checking things out and seeing how things are going on the ground. And in fairness, Montreal kind of was ground zero. It was definitely the most challenging place around the country. There were lines and waits elsewhere, but the situation was quite extraordinary in Montreal at the end of June and beginning of July. But I'm obviously still completely, in the position that was totally unacceptable what happened last summer with regards to passport processing. But I'm actually very pleased to be able to say that we've returned to normal. Whether you're at Guy Favreau, Laval, Saint-Laurent, in Montreal applying for a passport or anywhere else around the country, we're at almost like 98, 99% of passports if you apply in person being processed within 10 days and within 20 days if you apply by mail. We have hired, 1,200 additional staff since the height of the crisis. We're much more productive. We've streamlined a lot of processes, and we're really back to normal. So, if people have passports that are expiring, it's an important thing to do to make sure you're applying, but we're in a really good place right now when it comes to passports.
Was this, as you described, the situation being back to close to normal right now, was this simply all about just being understaffed at that point, or was there that many more requests for passports that just overwhelmed the system?
Well, the system was quite overwhelmed, and it was a bit of both. I mean, in a sense, we were understaffed because throughout the pandemic, we received far fewer applications. And then once travel restrictions were lifted in the early spring of last year, we received a huge amount of applications, kind of all at once, which created the backlog that we then had to get through over the summer and into the fall. But we are staffed up. We are operating at top clip, higher than we were pre-pandemic, for example. So we're in a really good place, and we have some new tools, in terms of monitoring what the forecasted volume is. Now, they're never perfect because you can't always predict when and how people are going to make their passport applications. But I feel very confident that we're in a much better position than we were, 6-7 months ago.
Minister Gould, given that federal employees are mandated to begin heading back to the office today, that's phasing in gradually through the end of March, but 2 to 3 days per week. Do you think that'll help the situation even more with the passports, or could it potentially be a little blip as there's a readjustment as people go back to the office?
Well, I would say that for Passports and Service Canada, those folks have been in the office the whole time. They weren't working from home because those are front-facing, client-serving services. And so certainly when we reopened offices to full capacity later in the late spring and May and June of last year, that helped because when we had reduced capacity, that limited our ability to serve the number of clients. But we've been fully in the office, the whole time. And so I don't think today's change will have much of an impact because those that were working in Service Canada and Passports have been in their offices the whole time.
So I would simply ask you to repeat for people who perhaps didn't hear it. With respect to passports and applying, we are now in a situation where you should not have to worry if you have travel coming up and you need a passport. What's the time frame?
Yeah, so if you apply in person at a passport office, so that is in the Montreal area, that's at Laval, at Guy Favreau, or Saint-Laurent, It's 10 days in person. Of course, if you have to travel before then, you can always get a rush service or an urgent service as well. And then if you're applying at a Service Canada Centre or by mail, it's 20 business days.
Okay.
And if for whatever reason you don't get something within that time frame, call the passport line. Again, that's been staffed up. Wait times are much reduced, and we can always make sure that we figure out what's going on. Sometimes it's because, a photo wasn't signed or documents weren't submitted correctly, and we can quickly get that sorted out and make sure people get their passport ahead of travel.
All right. I thought you were going to say right at the end there, if there's a problem, any problem at all, just call me directly. I am the minister, but no, don't call the minister directly.
You're a little busy.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Okay. KARINA Gould, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development Canada, thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.